We're going to go ahead and get started with our Board of Equalization. Today's date is June 2nd, 2025. The time is 11:03 a.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. In attendance are Commissioners Eberline, Duncan, and Matari. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. All right, first item, valuation adjustment, tax correction for AIN 106167. And I guess I have a question. Are these all different enough that we need to run through each one, or do you think we can lump some together?
There's only one that's a little different. 329191 is different than the remaining parcels.
Item 13.
Okay.
Crown Council.
All right, well, Jill, you want to go ahead and just get us started and explain these, please?
Sure. Jill Smith, Chief Deputy Treasurer. I don't know if I have to do that for a BOE hearing. I've never been in one. Chief Deputy Treasurer for the record. So it came to my office's attention back in November of 2024 that we had an issue with some of the parcels that were their values were adjusted as part of the BOE process last summer. The values were put into ProVal July 10th, and those values, whatever needed to happen to move the values from ProVal to Aumentum, didn't happen. And so when the bills were generated, there was no value, and so a $0 bill was generated. The assessor started joining the conversations December 19th. We anticipated the assessor's office moving forward with the VOCC to correct this issue. They haven't yet. Second half taxes are due June 20th, and so we came in front of the board asking for a decision to be made as to how we should move forward. And so here we are.
Thank you. Dyson, did you want to add anything more to that?
The only thing I would add in, Commissioners, is the thing that happened with these is that they were posted correctly in our CAMA system, so that's our master appraisal system. So the value was posted correctly inside of our system. There's then a process called PVI, which is basically an interface between the two halves of our system. So we have ProVal on one side, which is how we do assessment, and then we have Aumentum, which is how everything is handled as far as cadasters and taxes and whatnot. Those two things talk to each other through a system called PVI. And when we run that, there can be errors, things can get dropped, but typically the system tells us. For these properties, there was no error message, and the value went to 0. So in one half of the system, we have a certified value that was correct and posted correctly, and then the other half of the system, it didn't make it across that actual value, which is how taxes are determined. Now, typically we get a PVI error, we'd have some kind of indication. We didn't for these, so that was another subject for Simpatico to go in and look at. These values ended up dropping. So that's how they ended up going to 0 in the cadastre, and we didn't see them because if we get no error message and we don't see anything from PVI, we don't know.
So if you get an error message, what is the process to fix it?
So typically what we would do during that time frame is if a parcel errored out, we'd go in, we'd back out the posting, we'd repost, and if the error persisted, we'd go through the error code, we'd go talk to Aumentum if we had to. There's kind of a whole chain that we go through. So first we'd loop in IT. If they determine that it's either an XTR or Aumentum ticket issue, and then escalate from there. We have very limited capability to actually interface with those errors directly with ourselves. We kind of run it up the chain of command because we have no edit functionality. We can't do anything on the back end of Aumentum ourselves. So if an error persists in that way, that's how we would get it into the system.
So when this error was brought to your attention, how come that process didn't happen?
Commissioners up, and I want to recall the time frames that I think Jill spoke about. I think she said this came to her attention at the end of the year, but this was a roll that occurred in June.
Bring it back closer to you.
It occurred towards June, so as Dyson indicated, we weren't aware that there were no error messages. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dyson, this, when because we had some extensive, when it came to our attention, we had some extensive conversations with XTR, And I believe it was discovered in the course of one of those conference calls that there was a configuration issue in the system. Am I remembering that correctly? There was a configuration change that occurred, which is beyond the control of our department. It occurred, I believe, in IT, and it caused this issue. And so at that point in time, the system, ProVal, showed the values correct. It's just that the cadastre, if I'm saying that right, did not reflect those numbers. So it really is, to my understanding, it really is a matter of correcting the side of the system that would allow the treasurer to bill for the taxes. Because right now, when they generate the bills for the taxes, that side of the system operates off the values that are in the roll, and the roll shows the value at 0. These properties did get their assessment notices. They were notified of their assessments, and it has the value on them. But it's the actual list, the roll, that you don't really see, but it's used by the treasurer's office to generate the tax bills. And I don't know if I explained that entirely correctly, but that's my understanding of the way it works.
Yeah.
And Commissioner Matari, the treasurer's office is really not concerned with how it happened, except to make sure it doesn't happen in the future. We would just like to come up with the solution that the commissioners would like us to move forward with. At this point, and Deanne can speak more intelligently toward this than I can, I think it's too late to make a change to the value because the cadastre is closed for that year. I think we would have to do some sort of, it wouldn't be a tax cancellation, but similar process. And in the end, we're going to send these people a bill that none of the numbers are going to math correctly, but we can jerry-rig a total so that they're paying the taxes they should pay based on their values. And I think we had discussed at the business meeting that we would, for these parcels, give them a longer period of time to pay with no interest and penalties, because for one of these, they're getting a $37,000 bill in June.
Yeah, well, they're not getting a bill that they didn't expect. They're getting a bill that should have been sent to them, that they know that they owe money on their property. I think, from a resolution perspective, so that we can make this the least disruptive for the property owner, is to offer a 12-month proration beginning at some point that they could pay the county for that mistake. And, they can either pay it monthly, because some people have mortgages, so that would really screw up their mortgage. Others may have been expecting to pay their property tax, saw the bill at $0 and just said, well, I'm not going to do anything right now. I don't know. Assessor Kovacs?
I guess the question, I hear what you're saying, Commissioner Matari, but I guess the question is, I would ask of the treasurer, did the treasurer's office issue tax bills at $0? Is that what happened?
The bills weren't $0. The bills had the fees, because the fees are still due whether there's a value or not.
Okay.
So they did get bills.
But the
People
taxes
with
were
mortgage
zero.
companies, the taxes were 0. And for the folks with mortgages, a lot of people don't even realize they should be looking at their tax bill when they have a mortgage.
Yeah. Well, that's what I would propose is, what would work for your office, Jill? I mean,
We will make whatever the commissioners decide work. Am I right, Deanne?
Yes.
okay. So there's two components here. One is how we address the issue now that it's been discovered, and then what can we do in the future to ensure that this doesn't happen again. So does anyone on the board have any thoughts about how we can address the issue as it is?
What's the scope of all the total valuations?
Give me just a second and I can tell you. $19,563,615.
Which in Kootenai County is not a lot of properties nowadays.
No, it was only, in the end it was, a dozen properties, and all of them, the issue occurred because when the change was made to their value based on the decision of the BOE, that change didn't follow through into Momentum. So like the easy button for these would be next year or this year when BOE is finished and values are put into ProVal, take the list of those parcels that had BOE adjustments and just verify the values are correct in Momentum, and it's a dozen parcels. It would take, minutes.
Yeah. It seems like just sending a revised tax bill with a letter with some options and to have them contact your office to figure out what might be best as far as payment.
Okay. And I guess my question, we have the BOE decision from back in June of 2024 that says what the value is supposed to be. I don't know that we need anything else from you in writing to move forward. If you include in the resolution or whatever the vehicle is for a BOE adjustment, that we just create tax bills based on the value that was determined at the BOE. And then one of them, the one with the largest bill, there was also a judgment because they appealed to the court and had a further reduction. So we do have the judgment paperwork showing what they are supposed to be, the value they're supposed to be paying on.
Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the way I see it, there's simply a disagreement between these two databases. You have one that's correct and one that's incorrect. And is that really the long and short of it? One side of the database is correct, the other side is not. It's a very simplified way to say it. It seems like the decision you want to make today is simply just correct the database, send out a tax bill as if it had been entered correctly, along with your options for payment. And I think you could just make a oral decision. I don't think you really need written decisions for each of these parcels. If it can be covered in one oral motion, then I think that probably takes care of it.
I think, yeah, just offering up to a 12-month amortization schedule, and then if they want to do something different, you can come back before the board, but that should give you all the flexibility.
The assessor has something to say here.
Yep. Assessor Kovacs?
Commissioners, and I wouldn't disagree with what Dave is saying. I don't know if it's correct to characterize it as one side versus the other, because it's kind of a intertwined database.
Well, that's kind of what you said.
Yeah, I know, but
Just trying to-
I know. But I would like to clarify that back when the error was brought to our attention, I did have an extensive conversation with XTR. I asked the question, what can we do to fix this on the assessor side? And the response I got back was, and I'm paraphrasing, and I would have to go back and refresh my memory, but it was words to the effect of that the amount of effort, the juice would not be worth the squeeze. The amount of effort that would go into it to just fix it in the side of the system that would allow the treasurer to calculate tax correctly is not necessarily, because it's not necessarily beneficial, because we're working on simpatico, we're working on changing these issues, and then the issue of the configuration, we weren't even involved in that configuration change, so we weren't even aware. I'm not sure what we could do to avoid that in the future.
No, it just sounds like that when you were made aware of it, you should have handled it as if the system gave you an error. Just how you handle all the other ones that come up.
And all I'm saying is that was 6 months after the roll was finalized. I did ask that question.
It would have been nicer for the property owner to deal with it in January instead of June, just saying.
And I feel the treasurer's office felt that this was not a treasurer's office decision to make because we don't have the ability to cancel taxes. And by not billing them at some point this year, we would effectively be canceling taxes, which is outside of our purview.
Yeah, well, we're not canceling taxes. We're just going to send a revised bill with up to a 12-month proration. Now, with respect to the errors, I mean, the reality is that we somehow had a zero value on a property. Is that correct?
In one part of the system.
In one part, yeah, but we had a zero value somewhere, right? So that actually is probably an easy thing to identify, is that there should be no property in Kootenai County that has a zero value. So how can we go about making sure that we're not having zero values for properties? Is there a way that we can do that?
Yes, Commissioner, there is. There are several reports that we run to catch zero value properties. It's just where they're at in the database changes because there's gonna be two different results. So that's gonna be the actual cadastre value was at zero versus some other tables which would read for these properties as having the correct value. So we can extend our scope into the final cadastre to check for these as well, to kind of get a two-side verification.
It probably would be prudent, just, you know, I mean, look, even in the end, someone can always just go through the table and take a quick peek and sort it, just to see what the values are. But in the end, just something that can do that. You can't check for accurate values, but you can certainly check for zero values. I mean, those kind of edge cases, or if some number that's excessive. I think we had a number where someone's property was valued at like 30-some million dollars. It was like a residential home, waterfront, or something like that, where you get these edge cases on both sides that just kind of flag a little bit, and that would be helpful. And then maybe on the treasurer's side, we could figure out a way where we could flag for that stuff too. So if there's a zero value for the property, they know that, and that might be an XTR issue as well. And hopefully that'll resolve it moving forward. Sorry, Commissioner Duncan, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, just want to make sure that the motion covers what it needs to cover. And so if we're just saying that we're authorizing the treasurer to send out updated tax bills, I don't know how we can have the system fixed because it's last year's on that side. So I don't know, and I'm not sure that, I'm happy to make the
Yeah, the tax
motion.
bills with the corrected value.
Yes.
That's really what we want to say.
Okay, thank you.
And a 12-month proration option.
Yes.
Okay.
Because you gotta,
Okay,
how many properties do we have in Kootenai County?
And also that, because
Do you want?
Roughly 96,000.
this is really a property relation.
96,000.
Roughly, it's 96,000 and change bills that we send.
I don't think it.
Dyson might have a better number because they just generated assessment notices.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
upwards of 90, I think it's about 98 is what we actually had notices on, but that reduces based off zero notices and whatnot. So upward end of 97,000 is a good number.
So it should be perfect, but you got 13 properties that are out of line.
Only for this thing. There's been others with different issues, but for this particular issue, it's just these 13. So Jill, can one motion handle all 13? I know that you said number 13 is a little bit different, but I think with the corrected value and the 12-month proration, that should cover it.
I'd like to discuss item 13 separately because you might make a different decision for that parcel.
Okay.
Okay, well, go ahead, Joe.
So number 13, and again, Deanne, if you have anything to add, please do, is a parcel that had value. It's a cell phone tower, I believe. It's a parcel that had value for 2023. It got missed for 2024. It's going to have value for 2025. So no bill for 2024. Do you want us to do the same thing for that parcel?
Well,
And that was just the county dropped the ball.
they were due to pay taxes though, right?
Yeah, there was value.
Yeah, I mean, this was an
There
error.
should have been value, rather.
This was an error within the system, not someone saying that the property has zero value, correct?
I think that it wasn't an error in the system. It was someone neglected to do the thing that would put the value in the system.
Okay, well, I mean, they owe property taxes, so, I mean, I just assume that we add that one in there too and give them the same option.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you have a different suggestion, Jill? I mean, as far as,
Nope.
okay.
This is just not something we generally see, and so I'm at a loss a little bit.
Okay, so is the one that she's talking about, can you guys look a little bit further into that to see why that was a zero?
Yeah, I can take a look into that. This is a little bit of a surprise to us, so I haven't been able to research all the AINs in here.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks. You ready for your motion?
I'll try it. I move that we, for items 1 through 13, instruct the treasurer to send out a corrected value notice as far as tax is due with a 12-month proration in order to pay those taxes.
Payment option.
It's not proration, it's an option to pay it off.
Option to pay, so scratch proration and just 12-month option to pay.
Second.
Commissioner Eberline?
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan?
Aye.
Chair Cari?
Aye. Motion carries. Next up, public comment.
Commissioner Matari, this is Jill Smith, Chief Deputy Treasurer. I have public comment, I guess. And I had reached out to Dyson this morning, but probably he hasn't even seen my email yet. There are 2 more parcels that were part of the occupancy roll, and occupancy bills took longer than they would have taken historically to get out. From what I understand, these 2 parcels, mapping was working on at the same time the occupancy roll was being calculated. They were inactive at the moment that Dyson calculated the values for the occupancy roll. And so what happened in the system is not only did it not state an occupancy bill because they were inactive, but it brought their land bill down to 0 for the year. So we have these 2 parcels that we have first half payments on that are now showing as surplus and no value for the land for second half. And it's my understanding that there was a conversation on Friday that I was not a part of, and that maybe it was determined that it was too late for us to capture that value that was on the occupancy roll. I don't know if you guys remember when we had the issue with the occupancy roll either last year or the year before. Alan Dornfest told us that we didn't have the same statutory deadlines for the occupancy roll as we do other rolls because it's not a property tax. So again, I think that a decision as to whether we're going to collect on the value of the occupancy is not a treasurer's decision, and it's not an assessor's decision. It's a commissioner's decision. So if you could, I don't know if we need to have another BOE or how we should move forward on that. But since we're all in the room, it seemed like the time to talk about it.
So Jill, I think we might be able to bring it to a status update,
Okay.
and then we'll dive into that one as well. And then if you can get with the assessor's office so they can do the background information on those couple parcels or, the ones in question. Okay.
Anybody else? Public comment? 11:26, meeting adjourned.